Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew.
Hi.
Hey, a lot has happened again in AI the past week. And Matthew, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Do you know what the definition of a fable is?
I think I could talk around it. That it's a story meant to illustrate a point, or a moral.
A moral, yeah.
Yep.
But like I just looked it up, and the first phrase is a short fictional story. And that
Mhm.
kind of like outlines what happened the past couple weeks, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. We were promised a lot, and it was taken away from us. So.
So we got to use Fable, Claude's latest frontier model, for about a week. Maybe it was even a little less than a
A little
week.
less than that. Yeah.
And I started having some real fun with it, did some really neat things, and it does seem to be pretty powerful.
Mhm.
But then that kind of got cut short, and it got pulled off the platform by the US government. They ordered it
Mhm.
taken down because they seem to have found some vulnerabilities in it. But
There were actually some. The news was reporting there were some cyber attacks where Fable was involved, and so yeah, that was one of the reasons at least it got pulled.
anyway, well, we're here today to talk about loops and LLMs.
Yeah.
So, what have you got for us, Matthew?
So yeah, to start off with, when I was in my first internship, I was working doing Photoshop work and some web design, and we had a couple thousand images for our client that we needed to shrink down to web sizes. That was back when you had to make your images smaller so that it wouldn't take a while for people to download them. Um, and so I had Photoshop at the time, and there's an automate feature for Photoshop, but I couldn't get it to not make me have to press the enter key on every thing. It would go up, it would open the file, it would resize it, it would click the save button, and then it'd be like, you've got to press enter. And my thought at that point was like, where can I rent a monkey? Like, I just need somebody to push this button over and over again. And I ended
Isn't
up,
that what auto hotkey is for?
but it didn't exist. I don't, if it did exist, I didn't know about it yet. But I ended up literally balancing my mouse on top of the enter key to press it down and just walking away. And it was beeping, but it worked. But we're getting to that point sometimes with LLMs that the only thing that you're involved in, once the process is well defined, the only thing that you're involved in at this point is just approving, and very often it's a security prompt. But yeah, so one of the big things that has come about as we've been getting all this work is just running things in loops. Now, loops are not new, but running LLMs in loops is new.
Yeah.
So I've got a little image on the screen here. So uh, somebody came, or this is, yeah, Geoffrey Huntley came up with something called a Ralph loop. And basically his loop was, hey, I want the LLM to keep working on this thing until we meet the goal. And if you haven't met the goal, just keep working on it. And it seems like a fairly straightforward thing to do, but it is very, very powerful.
Hmm.
Now, very often it's going to, go the way that you ask, but sometimes it might shortcut the goal and find a simpler way to get there, or it may go around and get another issue or another way. But people have built off of that technology. And if you hear about Hermes and OpenClaw, those are built off of that technology where you just leave it running and let it figure out its methodology to get where it needs to go. But yeah, very powerful thing. I've used it, and it's been very helpful. And nowadays, built into Claude Code, you do have a more, or a little bit more cleaned up version where you have a /batch, a /loop, and a /goal. And so you can start a loop, and it's literally just going to keep running until you shut down the service, or you tell it to cancel, or you run out of credit.
So
And
are
yeah.
each of those three loops, or do they all three together make a loop? I don't,
The loop and the batch are loops, but the goal is an exit point. So
okay,
I haven't, or in when you're using a Ralph loop, which is what I've used most recently, you determine the goal as you're setting up the loop. But here you do it a little bit differently. Um, yep. So
okay,
one of the cool things about this, so I've done a lot of projects where I make a very detailed plan, and I'm like, okay, Claude, let's do this plan, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna do phase one, and so it chunks it and it does phase one and it does a good job, and then it sits down and it writes out 20 pages of documentation about how great phase one was that I didn't ask for. And so you're using a lot of credits every time it finishes a phase to move into another one. One of the cool things about the loop is you get a little bitty summary of what happened on that loop, and it just goes back into the loop. It's not until you exit the loop that it goes back to figure out what is the summary and what did you build. So you end up saving a whole lot of credits doing a loop if it doesn't get lost, because you're not getting those summaries every time it's done a little bit of work.
true.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be useful for a project I'm working on now with my wife. We keep getting, well, I ask it to do something to fix the process, and it keeps giving me these big reports back. I'm like, okay, but you still haven't solved the issue. So start on it. So, yeah, it would be nice to say, look, this is my criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Keep at it until you've, got it fixed.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very powerful. But if you don't define if you don't define your loop very well, you can end up in a very weird place or just wasting tokens. Every once in a while, you just have to look at it, going, hey, I think I know the solution to this, and you just poke in there and say, hey, what about this? And then it's like, oh yeah, that's right, we'll do that. It doesn't always have all the context that it needs.
Right.
So yep. So I think yeah, you had something you wanted to share, Doug. So.
Yeah, so today I got really excited because I've been trying to solve this problem of having AI do things on a schedule for me. And I discovered Claude Code has this thing called a routine. And so the routine, I realize it's kind of like co-work. We talked about Claude co-work in the past, but Claude co-work, it just, maybe the environment was too foreign to me because I'm used to working in a Claude Code environment.
Yeah.
But routines do a lot of what Claude Cowork is supposed to do. And the revelation to me came today when I discovered I could have this run in my repository that contains my whole set of agents that I use in my day-to-day work.
So
So
you're right now you have this folder set up on your computer and you've been working with it for a long time, but this is
yep,
not this is not a folder on your computer, right? This is
that's
a
right.
copy of that. Okay.
So my whole problem is I can tell my regular AI to do things on a schedule, but if my computer is off, nothing happens. Okay.
Yep.
So if I'm not in the office by 8:30 a.m., it wouldn't run. But in this case, this says run weekdays at 8:30 a.m. And I figured, well, okay, that's nice, but then it doesn't have all the context of my agents, which have a whole set of memories of like all the people, contacts, everything that I work with. And so I discovered that I can point it to the repository where my agents are backed up to and live. And so as long as I point to that repository now, I can actually call my primary agent, who goes by Ziba, and I can tell him to come up with a daily briefing, look through my emails, see if there's upcoming meetings and events. Maybe some are not listed on my calendar, so put them on my calendar if it's not there already. Like do these other things. I've got a whole bunch that I'm going to set up. I just set this one up like 5 minutes before we started this podcast, and it's supposed to send it to Slack. I didn't get a message on Slack, and so wait, did I? No, I didn't get a message on Slack because I don't think I have that set up correctly.
Yep.
Anyway, it can notify you by email, or you set up how you get the notifications.
I think the default
And
is going to be it notifies you in the Claude app, like gives you a Claude
yeah,
notification when it comes up.
so that's going to be helpful because one of my big problems, as Matthew will probably attest to, is that I get a lot of emails and I often skip the important ones. They don't catch my attention. And so this is going to look through and it's going to pull out all the ones that need action or a response and kind of prioritize them for me to respond to. So that will be very helpful.
Yeah, one of the other big reasons for using loops is, and I've been telling people this recently, is AI is a really good spot checker, but it's not really good at finding all of the instances of something. So if you give it a long text and you say, hey, how many times did I use the word and? It's going to come up with an easy, well, if you say, okay, did I use the word and in this document? It'll find one example immediately. And then you ask it, how many times did I use the word and? And it's like, 50. And it gives you a number that sounds right, but it's not likely to be right because it didn't actually, unless you told it to actually run a script and count, it's not there. It's just taking a guess that sounds right. But then you can set it into a loop. So if you say, hey, I'm only expecting maybe 2 or 3 per paragraph of this, that's a different word that's less common. If I'm only expecting 2 or 3 per paragraph, then I could set it into a loop where it goes through it paragraph by paragraph and then shows me the results if they're there or not. And if I can run it that way, then I can actually have it work through all of the problems. I've had it do that for my MCP, where I've had it go through all of my code function by function and give me a review. And that's really powerful because, yeah, if I just do a spot check, it's going to find 2 or 3 things and be done. But if it has to look at every one of them over and over again, even if there's no response, it's more expensive, but it's very efficient.
So it's a way of scripting because we've been saying that when you use an LLM, it kind of does a thing for a while and gets tired and gives up. Yeah. But so you're in better hands if you have the LLM actually write a script to do something. Then you can do it in a more regular and measurable way. Yep. And so you really want to try to save the LLM thinking for as minimal as possible so that you prioritize the things that can be measured and calculated and do those with a script and leave the general, like you said in your example, Matthew, like summarizing an issue or something. That's something that the LLM is good at, and you're not going to write a script to do.
So this is, when you if you just go and you ask an LLM to do something, then you're going to get a different response every time. So, hey, write me a script that does, do this, edit this document in this way. If you give it the same document every time, it's going to be different, which is, and sometimes you want that creativity, sometimes you don't. But we get a lot better results when we say, okay, hey, create a script, a very creative and a well-written script that's going to actually do this process over and over again. And so you have it create that script, and that creates a version, something that you can check. You can look at it and say, did it do it the way I want? And then you can literally shut down the LLM and just run it over and over and over again. And later on, you could have a mix of some of like an LLM running deterministic code. But yeah, I want the AI to do decision making, but I don't want the AI to do processing.
Right.
If the rules have already been determined, I want to keep that out of the AI because it's expensive. I just want to run that as Python code or TypeScript code over and over again. So, Yep. So I think that's probably most of what we had to share today. But it's been, as he said, it's been a wild week in AI, and the upside to Claude having to pull Fable was they reset our weekly limits. So I got twice as much done this week as I was expecting.
All right. Well,
All right.
yeah, and I can't wait to share probably next week. I'll share about all the things that I accomplished with the new Claude Code routines. I can't wait to get them working because I have things that I need to accomplish on a schedule, and I just get so busy. Days go by and haven't initiated the routine to get the thing done.
Yep.
And so this should help a lot.
Okay. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.